I'm Brian from Scale Doctors, and I'm going to show you how to assemble and install your ScaleKeeper. I'm also going to show you some of the newest features that I've added to ScaleKeeper. And to demonstrate it, I'm first going to switch out this white bracket for one with a black. The contrast in colors will show it off a little bit better. One of the cool new features is that everything just snaps together. There's no screws when it comes to assembling it. Everything will just pop in and snap. So now you can kind of see that the bracket that attaches to the scale rests on top of these arms on your wall bracket. And these are attached directly to the wall. Previous versions used a little pocket with an arm that was in there, and as long as you lifted the scale out first, then swung it down, it would last forever. But if someone tried pulling down on the scale without lifting it first, it would tend to pop that pocket and break your ScaleKeeper. So I've added some features now to make it far more robust. Like I said, I'm going to move this out of the way. To use it, you're supposed to lift it up, and you can see how it raises off these arms, then swing it down. Then when you come back up, you'll touch it to those arms, and then it'll lift and jump back on. But if someone doesn't know to lift it up first now, it'll lean, but if they keep pulling, it'll then just pop off those arms automatically. Nothing breaks anymore. So I'm really excited with those new features. Another new feature that I'll show off in the installation video are these two lugs that are underneath on the scale bracket. This supports the scale when it's in the up position, so it's really like it's sitting on a shelf, and it's not putting any load on the tape. But that's enough of the new features. I'll cover some more of that. Let's get on with the installation video. When you get your ScaleKeeper, you'll find that it's very compact and lightweight. It's actually just over half a pound. It's only 10 ounces. You'll find that there's a quick start guide. This tells you everything you need to know to use your ScaleKeeper with your bathroom scale and how to install it. Has our contact information. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, feel free to contact us. You'll get a little parts bag. We've got 2 hollow wall anchors that you'll use in the drywall section where there's no studs, and 2 screws that either go into the hollow wall anchor or directly into the drywall where there's a stud. I'll cover that in a little more detail in just a second. There's also a little round instructional decal that you'll either stick on the bottom of your scale or the wall just above it. You'll have guests or visitors come to your house that will be very curious about your ScaleKeeper and your scale stored like this. And instinctively, they're going to want to try to pull it down, and that's not the correct way to use a ScaleKeeper. You lift it up to unlock, and this decal will hopefully give them a little bit of a guidance on how to use it properly. But we'll cover that stuff in a little more detail in just a minute. You'll have a mechanism and a wall bracket. The mechanism can slide up and down inside the wall bracket, and it's captured by this little button on here. And if I push the button down and slide the mechanism up, they'll just separate on their own. I can then slide it back down through and it'll recapture itself. So it's very easy to take apart and put back together. The other piece that's in here, and the last piece, and this is the most important part of the installation, is to get this scale bracket attached to your scale so that it's really bonded properly. And before you take off this paper release film, we're going to want to practice a little bit. We want to make sure you've cleaned the top of your scale. I use isopropyl alcohol, so this really needs to be cleaned very well. And you're going to notice there's these 2 lugs. These are a new feature on the latest version here. And these lugs have a couple purposes. So while I'm practicing, before I peeled this off, it allows me to kind of get my bracket angled so that the tape doesn't touch. And now I can slide this back and forth where the bracket's square to the bathroom scale, and I can now get it slid so that the arms are centered about the LCD. And if I really want a more exact measurement, I can put a piece of tape on the bathroom scale, mark the center of it, and a piece of tape on the scale bracket, mark the center of it. Then I can slide, and when the two lines are lined up, I can press it down. And I really need to press this firmly. You really got to have, you need a strong bond between the scale bracket and the scale. And then double-sided tape needs some time to cure. And 24 to 48 hours is the recommended time by 3M for this particular tape. But in order to complete the installation, we don't do any kind of measurements. You won't need any measuring device. We use the scale with the bracket and the mechanism to determine the correct height of the wall bracket on the wall. So I'll show you how that works right now. So even though I said we have to let this bond for 24 to 48, we can let this, we can complete the installation, then let it bond for a couple more days. I'm going to bring in another scale that already has the bracket attached to it, just like you'll be at this part of the installation. I'm going to remove this one. I have the screws set really loose so I can pop it off the wall and get it out of the way to demo this a little better. So what you'll find is that all you need to do is pop this onto this. We've got a little hole slot in here that this will just pop through, and I'm using contrasting colors to show a little better. And you'll see that the little clip sticks through, and you can squeeze them, pop it back out, pop it back on. It's very easy to snap together and take back apart. So we're going to attach the mechanism in the scale bracket. We're going to come to your location in the bathroom where you want to put this. And one of the things I recommend is try not to put the feet of your scale, these little feet, you don't want them to be on the seam of a tile. So if you can move it over a little bit just to get your feet off the seam, that will make your readings be a little more accurate. And we mark the height of where this goes using the mechanism. And we want the mechanism in the fully extended state. You don't need to pull up on it and stretch it to get it there. Just make sure it's at the 90 degrees where this surface here and the scale bracket are at 90 degrees. And then we're going to let this dangle. This is just going to hang down, and we're going to determine our location with the scale a little ways from the wall. And then I'm holding this in the up position. I'm pushing the scale back till this bracket is flat against the wall now. Once I reach that position, that's where I now can slide this bracket up and down inside here. And there's a couple of notches on the wall bracket that I want to center these top two surfaces, this surface and this surface, inside that notch. So I'll show you here in a little bit of a close-up. So you can see how this will slide up and down. And then I want that to be somewhere centered around there. And it's not an exact location, it's just a rough, I'm trying to just get a rough area in the middle. It doesn't have to be exact. There's a lot of leeway with ScaleKeeper. So once I have this, all right, we're going to slide it up again. I'm pushing back on the scale, and I'm just holding this part up. I'm not pulling it by this piece, by the mechanism. I'm pushing on the front of the scale till now I'm touching the wall. Now I slide this up till I'm centered inside that slot or pretty close to it. And then I'm marking the top of the keyhole here. And that's where I'm putting my mark. And that's where I'm going to put the top mounting hole. And I'll show you a little close-up view of the scale bracket here. So we've got two locations we need to note. The top one is the top of the keyhole. And then the bottom one is inside the slot. Not inside this little cutout notch here, but you want to be right in the center of the slot. And it doesn't have to be perfect, because the whole purpose of this slot is to allow you, to give you a little bit of tolerance that if you don't get these two perfectly vertical, your scale's not going to be angled on the wall. You can now move it, angle it back and forth through that slot until your scale's nice and perpendicular with the floor, and so you don't have to have your scale sitting at an angle. So we're going to use our hollow wall anchors and our screws now. So what I typically do is once I find my location, is there a stud here behind this wall? And I bought a simple $7, this was $7 at an Ace Hardware, but pretty much any hardware store sells them. And you'll put it onto your wall and press the bottom. It won't work with this piece of particle board, but when you're on drywall, I'm going to turn out this light so hopefully we can see it a little better. I put it on the wall, I push the button, and now I drag it across, and it will light up and give me a line where my stud starts. So that's the left side of the stud. I would then mark that. Then I come from the opposite direction, push the button, move it across. There's the other side of my stud. So now I know where the stud is. So I could do the same thing here. If I happen to find that the stud was right here, well, I may want to move it over a little bit so that all I need to do is use, if I'm going into a stud, all I would do is put in this screw. This makes the smallest hole in the wall. It's almost, you pull it back out, you almost don't see it, especially with it so low to the floor. But if where I'm at, there's not a stud nearby, that's when you use the hollow wall anchor. So these hollow wall anchors, they don't need a drill. They're kind of self-drilling tips. You just put your Phillips head screwdriver into the end of them, and then you put the tip of it onto your drywall, and I push it in. I kind of start a little indent, and then you just start turning it, and it will cut its way into the drywall, and it's going to go in there so this head of the anchor sits on top of your drywall. You don't want to over tighten it and pull it in too deep, so get it so that this head is just kind of, it's actually kind of a thin little head on the hollow wall anchor, so that that's sitting on top of your drywall. Once you have your anchor in, then you put your screw into the anchor, and you'll screw that on in, and then you don't tighten it all the way down. You'll leave this sticking out about 1/4 of an inch because you're going to have to get the wall bracket back behind that screw, so don't tighten it all the way down. I typically do one hole at a time. I mark it, I put my anchor in, put the screw in, then I hang it, and then while it's hanging from this top one, it makes it very easy. I can then even put a level on here if I want. Find the center location. Now I can mark my bottom hole real easy. But I think a lot of people are just going to have it here, mark the top one, mark the bottom one, put both screws in. So however you want to do that. And we really are basically done. Once we have these screws in, you leave them out a little bit. Take your wall bracket. So now we got to adjust the angle on the wall. So we're going to snug this top one down a little bit. And I snug the top one down more than the bottom one. I still want, this has to be a little bit more snug because we're going to put the scale up, adjust it, and if it's too loose, we won't be able to hold it in position. So what I do is I snug this one down a little bit so that it's got some tension. It doesn't just move freely. And that seems pretty good. I can move it back and forth, but there's some tension on it. Now I'm going to put this back in. And you never pick up your mechanism just by the mechanism. You never dangle the scale by it. I'm always holding the scale when I'm putting these on. So I slide it through. It's now captured in here. And now we're going to adjust the angle. So with one hand, the ScaleKeeper is designed to use one-handed. So you're going to pull it up until these arms off the wall bracket, they're going to bump into the back side of this scale bracket. And you'll hear it. You'll hear them bump. But don't have to keep pushing. You don't want to be pushing it against the wall when you're going to do it. Let it come. It'll rest on those. You'll notice that your scale is going to be pretty parallel to the wall at this point. Then you just lift it up and set it on those arms. It'll actually kind of jump onto the arms automatically. And there it's in the up position. Now while this is here, I can angle that bottom screw and get whatever angle I need on this. I could even use my level if I decide I want to make it, get it perfect. So once I have that there, I've got to gently remove all these parts again just so I can get to that screw. And if you try just pinching this, gravity's pulling the scale down too hard. So what I do is I lift it up, and now while it's putting a little upward tension on it, I then squeeze those and that'll just pop right out. Once that one's out, I'm going to put the mechanism down, and now I'm going to push the release button, and I'm going to pop this one out of there. Now I can snug this down. You don't want to over tighten them because they're just plastic threads inside these wall anchors, so you don't want to over tighten them and strip that. And they don't need to be, it just really needs to be so that it doesn't move on the wall. We're basically done with the install at this point. I'm going to snap this back on. I'm going to slide this down. Now I can put it up again, and it's going to stay there. So at this point, I could put on my instructional decal, either stick it here on the scale or on the wall. I don't recommend putting it right in the middle, right where someone's going to be constantly touching it with their fingers, so I would put it kind of off center a little bit. Maybe same with on the wall above it, but you want it to be noticeable so that a guest or somebody knows how to use it properly. Now that we've got the installation done, we're going to take this back out. I'm going to just pop this out of here. Let this bond for another day or two. I can still use my scale if I need to in the next morning, step on it. I can weigh myself with this bracket still attached to it, but I want it to properly cure. And that completes the installation. Thanks for taking the time for watching this video. If you have any questions, comments, or concerns, don't hesitate to call me. My number is on our Quick Start Guide. It's on our ScaleDoctors.com website, along with our email address. I should be very easy to get a hold of. I'm always looking for ways to improve ScaleKeeper, so if you have any ideas or suggestions, please send them to me. I 3D print these myself. I do the CAD work myself and do the designs, so it's easy for me to incorporate new changes quickly. I'm not manufacturing tens of thousands of them that I have to sell through first before I can update them. I can update these on the fly and get new and improved parts out anytime I'm ready. So thanks again.